The Sinister doll. In the heart of a small, cheerful town, nestled between cozy cafes and a charming park, there stood an old, cluttered charity shop. The shop had an air of mystery about it, its dusty windows hiding the treasures inside. From faded books to second-hand clothes, the store was filled with relics of forgotten lives. One rainy afternoon, a young girl named Lily walked into the charity shop with her mother. Lily was 7 years old, with big blue eyes and a mop of curly brown hair that bounced with each excited step she took. She was a sweet child, always full of laughter, the kind of child who could light up a room just by being in it. The bell jingled as they entered, and the shopkeeper, a frail old woman with a hunched back and cloudy eyes, looked up from behind the counter, smiling with lips that were too thin and cracked. "Welcome, dearies," she rasped in a voice that seemed to have seen far too many years. "Looking for something special?" Lily wandered around the store, her mother browsing in another aisle. Her small hands touched everything: old teacups, jewelry boxes, worn-out stuffed animals. But then something caught her eye: a doll. It was perched on a high shelf, looking out over the room like a forgotten queen. The doll was beautiful, far too beautiful to be in such a neglected shop. She had porcelain skin, dark hair that fell in silky waves, and glassy green eyes that seemed to sparkle even in the dim light. Her dress was a delicate lace, the kind of gown a princess might wear in a fairy tale. Lily was enchanted. She tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing up at the doll. "Mummy, can I have her? She's so pretty." Lily's voice was filled with wonder. Her mother glanced at the doll, and for a moment her face showed hesitation. There was something unsettling about the doll's eyes, almost too lifelike, as if they were watching her, but Lily's pleading look melted her concerns. "All right, sweetie," her mother said with a smile. "We'll take her." The shopkeeper's eyes gleamed with a strange light as she took the doll down from the shelf and handed it to Lily. "She's a special one, my dear. Very special. Be sure to take good care of her." Lily cradled the doll in her arms, beaming with joy. The rain continued to pour as they left the shop, but to Lily, the day had suddenly become bright and magical. She named the doll Isabella. But what Lily didn't know was that Isabella had a dark past, one filled with sorrow, anger, and something far more sinister. At first, everything was perfect. Lily adored Isabella and took her everywhere. She would sit the doll next to her at dinner, tuck her in at night, and whisper secrets to her when no one else was around. Her parents found it endearing, charmed by their daughter's innocent attachment. But soon, strange things began to happen. It started small. Lily's parents, Emma and David, would find objects out of place. Keys in the fridge, shoes in the sink, lights flickering in rooms no one had entered. They laughed it off at first, chalking it up to forgetfulness or the quirks of an old house. But the incidents became more frequent, more unnerving. One evening, Emma was making dinner when she felt a cold chill run down her spine. She glanced over her shoulder and saw Isabella sitting on the kitchen counter. She hadn't put the doll there. Lee had left her in her bedroom. Emma shuddered. The doll's eyes seemed to follow her, gleaming with a malicious intelligence. "David," Emma called, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. "Did you move Lily's doll?" David poked his head into the kitchen, confused. "What? No. Why would I do that?" Emma frowned but said nothing more. She picked Isabella up and returned her to Lily's room, placing her carefully on the shelf above the bed. That night, Lily woke up screaming. Emma and David rushed to her room, hearts pounding in their chests. They found Lily sobbing, clutching her blankets tightly. "Sweetie, what's wrong?" Emma asked, wrapping her arms around her daughter. Lily looked up at her parents, her face pale and tear-streaked. "It's Isabella," she whispered. She talked to me." David knelt beside her, trying to soothe her. "It was just a bad dream, honey. Dolls don't talk." But Lily shook her head furiously. "No, she told me she's lonely. She wants to play with me forever. but she said she doesn't like you and Mommy." Emma and David exchanged a concerned glance. They tried to calm Lily down, assuring her that it was only her imagination, but the unease lingered in the room long after they had left. And then things took a darker turn. In the following days, Lily's behavior began to change. The sweet, bubbly little girl who'd once filled the house with laughter became quiet and withdrawn. She spent all her time with Isabella, talking to the doll in hushed tones, as if they shared secrets no one else was allowed to hear. Emma tried to engage her daughter, but Lily's responses were distant, almost robotic. She would stare off into space, her eyes glassy, as if she was somewhere else entirely. David grew concerned, too. He noticed that strange things continued to happen around the house. The temperature would drop suddenly, shadows seemed to move on their own, and a foul odor would sometimes waft through the halls without explanation. One night, as they sat down for dinner, Lily refused to eat. She stared at her plate, her face expressionless, while Isabella sat beside her on the table, her green eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "Lily, you need to eat," David said gently. Lily turned her head slowly toward her father, her eyes dark and hollow. "Isabella says she doesn't like you," she whispered. "She says, you're going to leave us." David felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "That's enough, Lily. Isabella is just a doll. She can't say anything." But Lily only smiled, a strange, eerie smile that looked wrong on her young face. "She told me she's going to make sure you and Mommy go away. Then we can be together forever." Emma dropped her fork, her face going pale. "David, we need to get rid of that doll." But it was too late. That night, the house came alive with sinister energy. Doors slammed shut on their own, lights flickered violently, and strange whispers echoed through the hallways. Emma and David lay awake in bed, clutching each other as the eerie sounds filled the air. Suddenly, the door to their bedroom creaked open. Lily stood in the doorway, clutching Isabella in her arms, her eyes vacant and cold. "She says it's time for you to go," Lily whispered, her voice devoid of any emotion. David jumped out of bed, trying to reach his daughter, but as soon as he touched her, a force slammed him against the wall with bone-crushing strength. Emma screamed, rushing to his side, but the same invisible force grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. Lily watched, her face expressionless, as her parents were dragged across the room and thrown into the hallway. The doors slammed shut behind them, locking them out of their own bedroom. They pounded on the door, screaming for Lily, but she didn't respond. All they could hear was her soft voice talking to Isabella. "Now we're alone," she whispered. Emma and David didn't sleep that night. They stayed huddled in the living room, too terrified to go back upstairs. Every now and then they would hear footsteps, Lily's footsteps, walking back and forth across the floor above them, accompanied by the soft scraping of porcelain against wood. In the morning, they went upstairs to find Lily sitting on her bed, brushing Isabella's hair. The doll's glassy eyes sparkled in the sunlight, and for a moment it seemed as though she was smiling. "We have to do something," Emma whispered to David. "We can't let this continue. We need to get rid of that doll." David nodded, his face grim. "We'll take it back to the charity shop. Maybe the shopkeeper knows something about it." But when they tried to take Isabella from Lily, the little girl flew into a rage. She screamed and thrashed, clawing at her parents with a strength that shouldn't have been possible for a child her age. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her voice seemed to echo with another, darker presence. "You can't take her," Lily shrieked. "She is mine." It took both Emma and David to wrestle the doll away from her. As soon as they did, Lily collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. Her body was limp and pale, her breathing shallow. Emma cradled her daughter in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "We have to hurry." They wrapped Isabella in a blanket, hiding her unsettling face from view, and rushed out to the car. As they drove towards the charity shop, the air around them grew thick with tension. The radio crackled with static. The car windows fogged up despite the warm weather, and a sense of dread settled over them like a heavy weight. When they arrived at the shop, they found it empty. The door was locked, the windows dark. They banged on the door, shouting for the shopkeeper, but no one answered. Desperate, they left the doll on the doorstep and sped away, hoping that would be the end of it. But that night, when they returned home, Isabella was waiting for them on the kitchen table. From that moment on, their lives became a living nightmare. Lily's condition worsened. She stopped eating, stopped speaking, and her body grew weaker by the day. Her once vibrant personality was gone, replaced by a hollow shell that seemed to exist only to serve the doll. Emma and David tried everything, priests, mediums, even burning the doll, but no matter what they did, Isabella always returned. The doll seemed to have an unbreakable hold over their daughter, and every day Lily grew more distant, more lifeless. The house itself became a prison. The doors wouldn't stay locked, the windows wouldn't open, and a suffocating darkness filled every corner. Shadows slithered across the walls like living things, and the whispers never stopped. One night, Emma awoke to find Lily standing at the foot of the bed, holding Isabella in her arms. Her eyes were glowing in the darkness, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Isabella says it's time," she said, her voice echoing with a strange, otherworldly tone. "Time for you to leave." Before Emma could react, the shadows in the room came alive, wrapping around her and David like tendrils. They struggled, but it was no use. The darkness pulled them out of the bed, dragging them across the floor. And then everything went black. Weeks passed, and the house fell silent. The neighbors noticed that the once happy family had vanished. No one saw Emma, David, or Lily leave the house, but it stood abandoned, its windows dark and its front door always locked. One day, a new family moved into town, a young couple with a daughter about Lily's age. They were excited to start fresh in the small town, looking forward to a quiet, peaceful life. They wandered into the charity shop one afternoon, browsing the shelves for something special to bring to their new home. The little girl tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing to a doll sitting on a high shelf. It was a beautiful doll with porcelain skin, dark hair, and glassy green eyes that sparkled in the dim light. Her dress was made of delicate lace, the kind a princess might wear in a fairy tale. "Mommy, can I have her?" the little girl asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Her mother hesitated for a moment, feeling a strange unease, but the doll was so lovely and her daughter looked so happy. "All right, sweetie," she said with a smile. "We'll take her." And as the shopkeeper wrapped the doll in tissue paper, her cloudy eyes gleamed with a strange light. "She's a special one," the old woman whispered. "Very special." The little girl beamed as she cradled the doll in her arms. She named her Isabella. And so the cycle began again.